The homeless teen had no idea that the wallet he returned with trembling hands belonged to the mayor's wife. His name was Artie. He was only 17, but life had been cruel to him since he was 11. After his father ran away and his mother died from a lung infection, Artie had no one left. He hadn't seen the inside of a classroom in years. He had no fixed address and slept under a small bridge near the old city market. Each morning, Artie woke up shivering, wearing a donated jacket with torn sleeves. Breakfast? Sometimes it was a piece of stale bread from a kind food stall owner. Sometimes just tap water from a public toilet. But no matter how hungry he got, Artie never stole. His mother once said before her final breath, "If you lose everything, the only thing you still own is your honesty." That sentence stayed with him. He grew up carrying wounds, but also a moral compass no one could take from him. That morning, the air was sharp and cold. Artie walked slowly to the city park, his usual spot to wait for food stalls to toss out leftovers. He strolled along the pathway, past wooden benches facing a small pond, and that's when he saw it. A wallet, dark red in color. It stood out against a pile of dry leaves. Artie froze. He looked around. No one was there. After a moment of hesitation, he carefully picked it up and opened it. Inside was cash. A lot of it. Probably more money than Artie had ever seen at once in his life. There were ID cards, several bank cards, and one photo of a graceful woman in traditional Kabaya attire, smiling beside a man in a suit. The name on the ID read, Anindya Wikiksono. Artie didn't know who the woman was. But he knew one thing for sure. This wallet had to be returned. Clutching it tightly, he took a deep breath, stood up, and looked at the city streets now waking up around him. What he didn't know was that this small decision would soon cause the entire city, even the mayor himself, to turn their eyes toward him. Artie walked away from the park with the wallet still gripped tightly in his hand. His fingers started to ache from holding it so hard. As he turned down a quieter alley, his pace slowed. He stopped beside a closed storefront and sat down on the curb, staring at the contents of the wallet again. The cash was still there. It wasn't just a little. It was enough for him to buy hot meals for weeks. Maybe even rent a small room for the first time in years. Maybe even get a phone, clean clothes, or see a doctor for persistent cough he had ignored for months. The voices in his head began to argue. You could use this. No one would know. But it's not yours, and you know who it belongs to. He looked again at the ID card. The name, Anindya Wikiksono, was printed beneath an address in one of the richest neighborhoods in the city. He didn't recognize the name, but something about it made him uneasy. The woman in the photo looked important. Her smile was composed. Her earrings sparkled even in the printed photo. The man beside her wore a sash with the city's emblem. Artie couldn't be sure, but he had a gut feeling that she wasn't just anyone. Still, the question remained in his mind. Was this a test? He sat there for nearly 30 minutes. Cars passed by. No one noticed him. Just another street kid. Just another shadow of the city. His stomach growled again. Finally, Artie stood up. He took the wallet, zipped it into the inside of his jacket, and started walking, this time with purpose. He didn't know exactly where that neighborhood was, but he had walked through almost every street in the city before. He'd find it. He would return the wallet, no matter how far. The decision didn't make his hunger go away. It didn't make the cold wind any softer against his skin, but it made his steps feel just a little bit lighter. What he didn't see was the small security camera mounted on a nearby pole. It had been recording the entire time. From the moment he picked up the wallet to the moment he walked away without taking a single bill. The footage wouldn't surface for another few days. But when it did, it would make him the center of a citywide storm he never asked for. It took Artie nearly 2 hours to walk across the city. His legs were sore, and the sun had begun to rise higher, bringing with it the unbearable heat of late morning. He had asked for directions from street vendors and ojeks, most of whom looked at him with suspicion. A skinny, barefoot teen in a patched-up jacket, carrying a worn-out backpack, didn't exactly inspire trust. But eventually he found it. The house was unlike anything Artie had ever seen up close. A towering white mansion sat behind tall iron gates. The driveway curved like a racetrack. A garden full of orchids and fountain statues stretched across the front yard. It looked like something out of a dream or a television drama. Artie stood at the gate, uncertain of what to do. A security guard wearing dark sunglasses stepped out a small booth and narrowed his eyes. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Artie took a small step forward, careful not to seem aggressive. He pulled out the red wallet from inside his jacket and raised it slowly with both hands. "Moth pack. I found this near the city park. The ID says it belongs to someone who lives here." The guard frowned and walked closer. He didn't even look at the wallet. Instead, he waved his hand dismissively. "Go. We don't take deliveries from people like you." Artie didn't move. "I'm not asking for money, sir. I just want to return this. Please." But the guard had already turned back toward the booth. Artie stood frozen, not knowing whether to shout, cry, or walk away. Then, behind the tall hedges, a soft voice interrupted the tension. "Is there a problem?" It was a woman's voice, calm, controlled, and curious. Artie turned his head and saw a figure walking down the driveway. A woman in a pale blue blouse and cream-colored trousers approached the gate. Her hair was neatly tied back, and a silk scarf hung from her shoulder. She looked exactly like the woman in the photo. The guard straightened immediately. "Ma'am, this boy says he found your wallet." But she didn't wait for the explanation to finish. Her eyes were locked on the wallet in Artie's hands. She walked to the gate, quickly unlocked it, and opened it just enough to step through. "You found this near the park?" she asked softly. Artie nodded. "I didn't take anything. I just thought you might need it back." She took the wallet gently and opened it. Everything was still there. Cash, cards, even the photo. Her expression didn't change much, but something deep behind her eyes softened. She looked at Artie again, really looked at him. His dusty hair, his sunburnt skin, the way his hand trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "Wait here," she said quietly. And without another word, she turned and disappeared back into the house. Artie stood still, unsure what to do next. He wasn't sure if he had done the right thing anymore. Part of him felt embarrassed, dirty, unwanted, out of place in such a clean, perfect neighborhood. He didn't realize that from one of the upper windows, someone was already calling her husband, the mayor of the city. Artie waited by the gate, standing under the scorching sun. Minutes passed, 10, then 15. He shifted from one foot to the other, unsure whether he should stay or walk away. The woman hadn't said anything else. She had just vanished behind that grand door, leaving him alone with the echo of her voice. He could hear the soft humming of sprinklers watering the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, a bird chirped, but in his mind, the silence grew louder with every second. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, the rumble of engines broke through the stillness. 2 black SUVs, clean and tinted, turned into the long driveway and rolled to a stop in front of the mansion. Artie instinctively stepped back, gripping the gate. He thought he was in trouble. Maybe someone had called the police. His breath caught in his throat. The doors opened. From one of the SUVs, a man stepped out wearing a gray batik shirt, slacks, and polished black shoes. Several people followed behind. An assistant, a photographer, a man with a clipboard. The man in batik looked directly at Artie. "Is that the boy?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. The woman reappeared from the doorway, nodding. "Yes. He walked all the way here to return my wallet. Nothing is missing." The man walked toward the gate and stopped just in front of Artie. His eyes studied the boy's worn-out clothes, the cracked skin on his lips, the way his shoes didn't match. "My name is Wicked Sono," he said. "I'm the mayor of this city. And you, young man, what's your name?" Artie looked down, nervous. "Artie, sir. Artie." The mayor repeated the name slowly, as if weighing its meaning. Then, without warning, he extended his hand through the gate. Artie hesitated, but then he reached forward and shook it. The mayor's hand was firm, but warm. The photographer started clicking. The assistant whispered something quickly into a phone. Then the mayor turned toward the waiting cameras and said clearly, this young man returned a wallet filled with money and important documents. He asked for nothing, didn't take a single thing. He walked here on foot, alone, This is what honesty looks like. The cameras kept flashing. Artie squinted from the lights. He wanted to disappear. He didn't like the attention. But he stood still, holding his breath, as if any wrong movement might undo everything. After a few more words to the press, the mayor waved them away. "Enough photos," he said. Then he turned back to Artie. "Come inside," he said. "We have something to talk about." Artie opened his mouth, unsure if he should agree. But the woman beside the mayor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and gave a reassuring smile. In that moment, something shifted. The boy who had walked the streets for years with no one seeing him was suddenly being watched by the entire city. And everything was about to change. The front door opened slowly, revealing a grand marble hallway with towering ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Artie stepped in cautiously, wiping his feet on the mat out of habit. Though his soles were already dusty beyond help, the air inside was cool, scented with something floral and expensive. To Artie, it felt like another world, a world he had only seen through the windows of cafes or on flickering televisions and shop displays. The mayor led him into a lounge room filled with soft couches and polished wooden furniture. An assistant handed Artie a glass of cold water, and for a moment, Artie just stared at it. It had been days since he'd had a drink that wasn't from a cracked faucet. He drank slowly, careful not to seem greedy. Across the room, the mayor sat with his wife. They both watched Artie in silence for a moment, studying him, not with judgment, but with a sort of cautious interest, like they were trying to understand something deeper than his torn clothes. Then the mayor spoke. "How long have you been living on the streets?" Artie looked down. "Since I was 11, sir." "Where are your parents?" "My father left when I was small. My mother died when I was in 6th grade. The room fell quiet. Even the assistant, who had been typing on a tablet, paused for a second. "And what made you return the wallet?" the mayor asked. Artie didn't think long before answering. "My mother told me, when you have nothing left, your honesty is the only thing that still belongs to you." The mayor leaned back slightly in his seat. His wife lowered her gaze, clearly moved. The silence returned, but this time it was heavier. The mayor eventually nodded to his assistant. "Call the education department and set up a meeting with social services." Artie's eyes widened. He hadn't expected any of this. "Sir, I didn't come here for—" But the mayor raised his hand gently. "I know, and that's why you deserve more." Moments later, a tray of warm food was brought in. Real food: rice, grilled chicken, sautéed vegetables, even dessert. Artie hesitated again, but the mayor's wife smiled at him and gestured warmly. "Please, eat." Artie picked up a spoon. His hand was shaking. The mayor's wife then asked him a simple question. "If we offer to help school, housing, clothes, would you accept it?" Artie paused, still chewing. He swallowed, wiped his mouth with a napkin they'd given him, and answered honestly, "I'd accept school. I want to learn. I just want to live normal." No applause, no grand reaction, just a single nod from the mayor. That night, the city's most powerful couple sat with a homeless boy at their dinner table. No cameras, no reporters, just 3 people, each carrying a story that would soon change the face of their city. The following morning, Artie woke up not beneath the familiar cold of concrete, but on a real bed, soft, warm, and clean. He blinked at the ceiling, unsure if it was all a dream. But the scent of breakfast drifting from downstairs reminded him that this new world was real, at least for now. He had been offered a guest room in the mayor's house for the night. Clothes had been left for him on the dresser. A social worker had come by late in the evening to ask questions, not to interrogate, but to understand. Everything still felt too fast, too unfamiliar. As Artie quietly walked into the dining room, he was greeted by the mayor's wife with a gentle nod. The mayor himself was already reading the morning paper, but something was different. His face was on the front page. "Teen homeless boy returns wallet. Turns out it belonged to mayor's wife. City praises act of integrity as footage goes viral." The article was accompanied by a still image from a nearby CCTV camera, showing Artie on the park bench, holding the wallet. Another photo showed him shaking hands with the mayor at the gate. Artie stared, frozen. "You didn't know?" The mayor asked, looking up. The video of you at the park has over 4 million views since last night. Artie's throat dried. He hadn't returned the wallet to be seen. He didn't want any attention. Now, it felt like the entire city was watching him. Within hours, his name was trending across social media. Offers began pouring in schools, businesses. Even individuals wanted to donate. A prominent school messaged the mayor's office, offering Artie a full scholarship. A startup company pledged to sponsor his education and future training. But amid all that noise, Artie kept the edges. When asked to speak with the press, he politely declined. When TV shows invited him to appear, he quietly refused. The mayor respected his choice. He didn't ask for this, the mayor said in a press briefing later that day. That's why he deserves every bit of it. Later that afternoon, Artie visited the park again. He sat alone on the same bench where it had all started. But this time, people recognized him. A street vendor walked up and handed him a warm cup of tea without asking for payment. A passing jogger nodded with a smile and said, "Thank you, Deck." And then a little boy approached shyly and asked, "Are you the honest boy?" Artie nodded awkwardly. The child smiled, gave him a candy, and ran back to his parents. That moment hit harder than any headline, not because of fame, but because, for the first time, Artie felt like he was being seen not as a problem to be avoided, but as a person worth acknowledging. And somewhere in the city's heart, something had shifted. Later that evening, as the buzz around Artie continued to grow, the mayor returned home after a day filled with interviews, meetings, and calls about the boy with the red wallet. The city council had already scheduled a special session to discuss expanding youth support programs, triggered entirely by Artie's story. But something else was stirring behind the scenes. In the grand hallway of the mayor's residence, a man in a dark suit waited quietly. His hands were folded, his face serious. He wasn't a journalist or a government official. He was a private representative from the Minister of Social Affairs, sent directly from the capital. The mayor greeted him with curiosity. "What brings someone from Jakarta here on such short notice?" The man replied calmly, "We saw the footage. We read the reports. The minister wants to meet this boy, not on television, not for show. Privately, she thinks he's important." The mayor hesitated. Artie had already been overwhelmed by attention. The boy barely spoke during dinner, visibly uncomfortable under the weight of so many headlines. Still, this felt different. The next morning, Artie was told about the meeting. His expression didn't change much, just a quiet nod. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask what for. He simply agreed. At noon, a black car picked him up from the mayor's house. Inside the minister's regional office, Artie was brought into a modest conference room. No cameras, no lights, no reporters. Just a woman in a navy blouse, sitting at a long table, smiling kindly. "You don't know me," she said, "but I know a lot of kids like you, and I've seen what you did." Artie stayed silent. She didn't pressure him. After a few seconds, she leaned forward and asked, "If we gave you a chance, not just school but real guidance, mentorship, maybe even a future in leadership, would you take it?" Artie blinked. He didn't know how to respond. "Leadership? I just returned a wallet." She smiled. "That's exactly why we want to help." Behind her, one of the aides laid out a folder. Inside was an enrollment form for a national civic program that partnered with scholarship foundations, skills training institutions, and social missions. It was usually reserved for older teens and college students with perfect resumes. But an exception had been made. The minister signed the recommendation form herself. "Only if you want it," she said softly. Artie looked at the papers, then at the woman who had traveled hours just to meet him. He didn't understand everything, but in his heart, something told him this wasn't just about charity. It was about trust. For the first time, the system wasn't trying to fix him. It was inviting him in. The following week, Artie quietly began his new life. He had declined nearly every public appearance and interview, but his name continued to echo through city halls, school assemblies, and even televised debates. People had begun to ask, how many other honest kids like Artie have been overlooked? In response, the mayor's office launched a new initiative, Program Judger, aimed at supporting you from street conditions, providing shelter, education access, and psychological support. The program's poster featured a simple silhouette of a boy holding a wallet. No name, no logo, just a message. Integrity can change everything. But the city didn't forget the real boy behind the message. One cloudy afternoon, Artie walked back to the same park where it all began. This time, he wasn't wearing a ragged jacket or torn sandals. He wore a school uniform, clean, neatly ironed, with a badge from a private school that had offered him a full scholarship. His backpack was no longer falling apart. His steps were slow but certain. As he passed by the familiar bench, an elderly woman selling peanuts from a cart waved at him. "Deck Artie," she called. "I saw you on TV." He smiled awkwardly and bowed slightly. "That wasn't supposed to happen, boo." She laughed. "Then I guess honesty doesn't need to be planned, yeah?" Nearby, two boys who used to sleep under the same overpass as Artie recognized him. One of them called out, "Artie, you really live with the mayor now." He shook his head. "No, I live with myself now." They laughed. But Artie's answer wasn't meant to be clever. He had started attending school every weekday. Tutors helped him catch up on years of miseducation. On weekends, he volunteered at a local shelter, quietly, without media. The mayor and his wife didn't parade him around. They respected his space, but they checked in often, sending books, notebooks, and once a used guitar, because Artie had once mentioned his mother used to sing. But not everyone praised the boy. Some online skeptics questioned his story. Some said it was staged, that the wallet had been planted, that it was all a publicity stunt. Artie never responded. He didn't have to, because those who saw the look in his eyes during that first press photo, half scared, half stunned, knew it was real. And the mayor, during a council meeting, shut down every critic with a single sentence. Artie didn't ask for our spotlight. We followed his light. From that point on, the discussion shifted. Not about Artie, but about how the city would find, support, and protect more kids like him. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows of the small apartment now provided for him, Artie sat alone at his desk. He was writing something, slowly, carefully. Each word was shaped with deep thought. He still made spelling mistakes, but that didn't matter. The letter wasn't meant to be sent. It was for his mother. He wrote about the day he found the wallet, about the gate that wouldn't open, about the woman who took it back with a quiet stare. He told her how people suddenly cared, how strangers spoke his name as if they'd always known him. But most of all, he wrote this: "I didn't take the money, Ibu. You were right. When I had nothing, honesty was the only thing that still belonged to me, and it brought me here." After folding the letter, he placed it inside an envelope and wrote her name on the front. He didn't seal it. He simply slid it under a worn photo frame beside his bed, an old picture of him as a child, sitting on his mother's lap, both smiling despite the faded colors. That night, he slept peacefully. The next day was an unusual one. His school had organized a citywide civic event, and the mayor had requested Artie attend, not to speak, but just to be there, quietly, among the crowd. The event took place in the city's open plaza, where students from dozens of schools, city workers, and families gathered. There were booths about kindness, volunteer programs, street safety, and education opportunities for underprivileged youth. Artie walked through the plaza, wearing a school uniform and a borrowed umbrella. People recognized him, but no one swarmed him. They simply nodded, smiled, or quietly said, "Terma, Casey." In the center of the plaza, a tall banner had been raised. It wasn't a picture of Artie. It was just a large wallet, the same red color. Below it, printed in simple typeface, "He returned it and changed us all." Artie stared at it for a long moment, not with pride, but with quiet disbelief that something so small, something so ordinary, could ripple outward in a way so vast. He turned away and walked toward the children's reading corner. There, he sat with a group of younger kids, flipping through donated books. One little girl asked him, "Cac, are you a teacher?" He shook his head. "I'm just someone who got a second chance." She smiled, clearly not understanding, and handed him a coloring pencil. They began drawing together. In that moment, Artie didn't feel like the city's symbol of integrity. He didn't feel like a headline or a poster. He just felt like a boy again, a boy finally allowed to dream. A month had passed since Artie returned that red wallet. Life had changed in ways he never imagined. He now wore clean clothes every day. He no longer worried about where his next meal would come from. He had a place to sleep, books to read, teachers who knew his name, and classmates who no longer looked at him with pity, but with quiet respect. Still, he never chased the spotlight. But fate had one last turn planned. One morning, a formal letter arrived at his apartment. It was from the mayor's office, sealed with a gold-embossed emblem. He opened it with trembling fingers. You are cordially invited as a guest of honor to the City Hall Integrity Awards, to be held this Friday. At first, Artie didn't want to go, but the mayor's wife called him personally. You won't be alone, she said gently, and you don't have to speak. Just be there. So he agreed. That Friday evening, under a sky of golden clouds and evening lights, City Hall was filled with hundreds of people. Civil servants, teachers, youth leaders, activists, and media. Banners read, "Integrity is contagious," and soft music played in the background. Artie arrived quietly, accompanied by a counselor from the social welfare office. He wore a borrowed black suit. His hair was trimmed neatly. He kept his eyes low as cameras flashed when he walked into the grand hall. The mayor stood at the podium, giving a speech about civic duty, youth empowerment, and how the city had begun changing policies after a boy returned a wallet, without a request, without a fuss. Then, just before the ceremony ended, the mayor held up a small velvet box. And now, for the first time in the city's history, we present a new annual tradition, an award not for popularity, not for money, not even for achievement, but for character. He paused, glancing toward Artie. Please welcome to the stage. Artie. The applause was thunderous. Artie froze in his seat. The counselor nudged him gently. He stood, hesitated, then slowly walked the stage. The entire room watched as a boy who once slept beneath a bridge crossed the marble steps in polished shoes. The mayor opened the box. Inside was a medallion, engraved with a wallet and a flame. The flame of integrity. He hung it around Artie's neck. Cameras clicked. Eyes glistened. But Artie didn't smile for the photographs. He looked down at the medallion in silence. And then, unprompted, he walked up to the microphone. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, almost in a whisper, he spoke. I don't know what to say. I didn't expect this. I don't think I deserve an award for just doing what's right. He looked across the crowd. I just want to say thank you. Not for this. He touched the medal. But for seeing me? Silence. Then applause. No one in that room would forget his words. As Artie stepped down from the stage, the mayor's wife stood at the foot of the stairs. She took his hand, whispered, Your mother would be proud, and gave a nod that said everything else. The next day, people still talked about the speech, the medal, the ceremony. But Artie? He returned to school, to books, to silence, and to a life he was finally beginning to build, with nothing in his hands, except his honesty,